From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. Don Kirlin is a visionary leader whose remarkable contributions have left a profound impact on both the aviation and skydiving worlds. As the founder of Air USA, Don provided tactical aircraft services to U.S. defense agencies and contractors, earning recognition as the owner of one of the, quote, world's most advanced private air forces. An ATP-rated pilot and flight instructor, he is certified in numerous aircraft, including the Boeing 737, Cessna Citation, and even the famed MiG-29 Fulcrum. These just a few of many aircraft certifications he has held. Don is also an authorized instructor for experimental aircraft, such as the L-39 and British Hawk. Don's skills extend beyond the cockpit. He's also an A&P mechanic and, of course, a sports skydiver. Don's most celebrated accomplishment in skydiving is the creation of the World Freefall Convention, the largest skydiving event of its time. Held annually from 1990 to 2006, the convention brought together thousands of participants from all 50 states and over 55 countries, with record-breaking years that saw over 63,000 jumps in just 10 days. Don's efforts earned him a well-deserved induction into the Illinois Aviation Hall of Fame in 2022. In 2024, his extraordinary contributions to skydiving were further recognized with his induction into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame, honoring his pivotal role in advancing the sport and bringing people together through his innovative spirit, easily for the greatest skydiving celebration in the sport's history. I'm honored to welcome Don Kirlin to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Hey, Don.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be talking to you, and it's always great to see you again.
Likewise, Don. What a pleasure. I'm so excited for my audience to learn about not just your career, certainly the World Freefall Convention and some of the activities you're into now. So before we get into all the meat of that, I want to start early. It seems like aviation is in your DNA. Tell me about your younger years. Were there members of your family in aviation that influenced this passion?
Most definitely, yeah. My father was a pilot, and he had just a very small little two-seat aircraft, but I was very fortunate to be able to go fly with him. I've got a picture of me sitting on his lap when I was about 5 years old, with my hand on the yoke and acting like I was flying the airplane. And I think that's when my passion started. My brother's also a pilot, and fortunately in my family, my wife's a pilot, and both my sons and my daughter are all pilots. So it's definitely in the gene pool for sure. And yeah, and so I kind of grew up with flying. I was fortunate enough to be able to solo on my 16th birthday, and was an instructor by 18, and actually was flying a corporate jet for the Department of Energy by the time I was 22. So, I was just able to really just dive into aviation, and started skydiving when I was I was a sophomore in college when I started skydiving. So that was 1973, and been jumping ever since. So just kind of love skydiving and love flying airplanes.
Where did you go to college, and what was it that you were studying?
I went to the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, and I did both my undergraduate and my graduate work there. And I did my undergraduate work. I had a dual major. I had a major in business administration and also in clinical psychology, just because I found it very interesting. And then went back and got my MBA.
Wow. I would have just assumed with your love of aviation that it would have been aviation themed, or that you would have gone to Embry-Riddle, or how come that path didn't follow suit with what you were already doing?
Because neither of the Embry-Riddle locations are located next to mountains where I can go skiing every winter.
I was going to ask you that. Something you said to me earlier this year was, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a pilot and I wanted to live in Colorado. Why did you want to live in Colorado, and knowing that so young?
My oldest brother is 11 years older than I am. So when he wanted to come and look at schools out in Colorado, he ended up going to school out in Colorado, but he came out here to look at schools in Colorado and I would have been like 6 or 7 at the time. Saw the mountains, saw the Colorado mountains for the first time, and I, well, my parents will even say that, from the age 5 and 6 on, I said I'm going to be a pilot, and there was never a plan B. Same thing when I saw the mountains for the first time. I said I'm living in Colorado, and there was never a plan B. So sure enough, when I graduated, in fact, senior year in high school, when you take your ACTs and your SATs, and you can send them out to, I think, 10 different locations, I said, no, I just need 3, and I named the 3 universities in Colorado. That was it.
And as we speak right now, you're speaking to me from your home in Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. That's right. Yeah, it's great. So literally, we've got a place up in the mountains up in Breckenridge. So it's an hour and a half door to door. So basically, anytime there's a big snowstorm, grab my laptop and walk out the door.
Sounds like a good life you've got.
It's a great
there.
life. It's a great life all the way through.
Fantastic. You got your pilot's license at age 16, became an instructor at 18. And then in your early 20s, flying corporate jets. So isn't that the dream job right there? I mean...
Oh, no. That was the beginning. That was just the beginning. So, no, I was fortunate enough to go on. I ended up joining the Navy. Went through the Navy flight program. After I got out of the Navy, came back, and that's when I went and got my master's degree there in Greeley and met my wife. And that was actually, in fact, that was 45 years ago right now. So we met in Greeley, Colorado, and then quickly we were there for a very short time because she wanted to move to Boulder, so I moved to Boulder and been here ever since. But rather, after I got out of the Navy and came back to Greeley to get my master's, that's when I opened up Sky's West Parachute Center. Being a skydiver is one thing, but it's like, my thinking is as long as you're a skydiver, you might as well own a drop zone. And so I opened up the Sky's West Parachute Center in 1979. And ran that until I sold my interest in that. I think probably about maybe 84, 85, something like that. But I was the pilot and jump master and instructor, all 3 at that drop zone.
I know a lot of DZOs listening have worn all those hats, many still wearing all those hats. What was the circumstance that led you to even making your first jump?
Well, great question. So at that time, again, a sophomore in college, I was flying an aerobatic airplane called a Citabria, which is a very lightweight fabric and metal aircraft. And to do aerobatics legally, you have to wear a parachute. So I was already flying aerobatics, and I was already wearing a parachute, and it just made sense to me that if I'm wearing a parachute, well, I should probably know how to use it rather than, if I break a wing off or something like that, have hesitation, should I jump out of this airplane or not? So I thought I'm just going to go make one skydive so I have the confidence when the time comes, if the time comes, I have no problem jumping out of an airplane. So I went and made my first skydive, and it was totally and completely overwhelming, way beyond what I ever expected. It was such sensory input and just sensory overload. And it was great. I loved it. It was just super intense. So I thought, okay, I got to do that again. See if I can really get this under control. So I went and made a second jump, and it was just as intense as the first. So I thought, all right, one more time. I'm just going to do this one more time. So my third jump, I did it. I loved it, and I went and bought my skydiving equipment within a couple days later, and I was hooked for life and been jumping ever since.
I find this detail to be insightful a little bit to who you are, Don, because most pilots think that maybe bailing out is a lot, is something you need to be prepared for, but is unlikely to happen. And so very few pilots would ever go to the added steps that you did to actually experience it, to make sure you were ready in the moment. What's the insight there about you? Because most people would never do that.
I think you're right. I think that's true. And I guess for me, if obviously, even if I hadn't gone through the training, would I have jumped out of an airplane that I just broke the wing off of? Sure, I would have. However, would I have had just a moment's hesitation, which may have made the difference between life and death? Possibly. So just like anything, just like, when you're flying a twin engine airplane, a lot of people flying twin engine airplanes will go out and practice their engine failure of one engine, and then they get their multi-engine rating. And quite often that's the last time they ever really truly practice that. Whereas currently I fly a Citation corporate jet. And every year, I do go through simulator training, which is fine. But once a year, I actually go out in the airplane and actually, literally on takeoff, I have an instructor actually fail an engine on me in the airplane for real. And you experience what it's really like. Same thing. I go through the whole stall series in the airplane, and it's just a confidence builder. Because it's one thing to do it in a simulator, but it's another thing to do it in a real airplane and go, oh, well, yeah, this is no big deal. I can handle this. It's just fine. So I guess it's kind of a confidence thing, but also just a don't hesitate. If the time's right, just do it right now thing.
Don, how many hours do you have in your logbook?
Just under 18,000. Yeah.
It's remarkable. So you make your first jump, or you make your second jump, then your third jump, you buy your gear. Mm-hmm. You're hooked enough to then want to start a drop zone. One thing I'm struggling to understand in terms of the pieces of your career is you're running the World Freefall Convention, which is just this monster undertaking. You're a commercial pilot at some point in your journey with American, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And then you also have Air USA. Like how does all this work in your life? It sounds like such big things. And yet you have accomplished so many things simultaneously.
It really truly was a handful at one point in time, because I had flown for a regional airline called Comair in '88, and then I got hired by Piedmont Airlines, which ultimately ended up being merged into becoming American Airlines. So in 1989, I was an airline pilot. In 1990, was the first year I started the Freefall Convention. If anybody remembers, way back in 1990, there really weren't cell phones. So literally, I would be on, say, a 4-day trip with the airlines, and every time we'd stop, and we'd have like an hour and a half layover at some station before we would depart on the next leg of a 4-day, four-leg trip. I'd literally go out to a payphone, and I had my whole list of people, the aircraft operators, the FAA, tandem pilots, video people, on and on and on and on. Everything that you need to have to put together a World Freefall Convention, I literally organized the first year on payphones while on a trip in between flights going from one place to the next. So, yeah, it was a real handful. So, and that was 1990 for the first Freefall Convention. And then in 1994, while being an American pilot and also running the Freefall Convention, is when I started Air USA and started traveling to various former Soviet republics to acquire aircraft to import them for what ultimately became Air USA's contract with the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps for air-to-air combat training.
Okay, man. I feel like we have 3 chapters. So let's start with Chapter 1, which is World Freefall Convention. And that's probably not even really Chapter 1. Chapter 1, I suppose, is being a commercial pilot. But Chapter 1 for this podcast, you start the World Freefall Convention in 1990. Would you give a summary? There's a generation of skydivers that know all about the World Freefall Convention. It is the greatest event of their skydiving careers. There was nothing really quite like it to the scale of when you did it at its peak, and certainly nothing since. For those that are unfamiliar, there's a new generation of jumper that never got to experience this. We're essentially 20 years on since the last one was hosted, I believe.
Right.
So for those that know nothing, what was a World Freefall Convention? And then if you would tell me, how did it even come to be?
So the city of Quincy actually came to me because at that time, back in 1989, I was the only active skydiver in the city. And they really wanted this event to be held at Quincy Airport, because if you know anything about Quincy, in August, there is nothing at all happening in town. It's hot, it's humid, nobody wants to be there. So, except a bunch of skydivers. So the Freefall Convention, year one, I thought, all right, and they wanted me to do it in 1989. I said, well, I'll do it, but I need a year to really get ready for this. I want to make sure if I'm going to do it, it's got to be done right the first year, and I got to knock it out of the park. That's all there is to it. So to accomplish that, I'd lined up 3 DC-3s, and there were some other specialty aircraft as well. But to really, really, really get everybody's attention, I needed to bring in a C-130, but not just a regular C-130, but what's called an L-100-30, which is most people would refer to it as a stretch C-130. It's actually 22 feet longer, and it could actually carry 175 skydivers. So I contracted with Southern Air Transport to bring in a C-130 and advertised it and marketed it all year that we were bringing in a stretch C-130. Well, as you well know, the community of skydiving, you hear a lot of stuff that never really happens. There's a lot of, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of promises made that are unrealistic and on and on and on. Well, since this is my first year, myself and my partner, Rob Ebbing, nobody knows who we are. We've never been heard of in the big sport of skydiving, even though I'd been attending other skydiving boogies for probably 15 years. So I was known in the local circuit, but nobody really knew, especially as a promoter. So for going into a year, I advertised in every possible media that we're hosting it and we're bringing in this C-130. Well, it was interesting. Again, this is still pretty much pre-cell phone, so I put in a bank of payphones, and I would walk by it frequently, and it was always a line of skydivers waiting to get to these 12 payphones, and the conversation was the same over and over and over again. They were sent there as scouts. They're talking to their home drop zone, and I heard the same conversation. It's here. It's here. It's really here. I'm looking at it. It's a C-130. And they had a hard time convincing their home drop zone, but it's like, no kidding. They really brought in a stretch C-130, and they're jumping out of it. So that was year one, and we had pretty good attendance. We had about 900 people, which I was really happy with for year one. But then it grew substantially every year thereafter as we continued to not only increase the fleet of aircraft, but the unique fleet of aircraft, an unusual and specialty aircraft, which was kind of one of the many signatures of the World Freefall Convention.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Part of my brain is going, for year one of a boogie to have a stretch C-130, how does one even figure out the economics of that? Like, how many loads need to be flown to be profitable? What is the ferry fee on a C-130? I just can't even wrap my head around that expense. That's so risky.
If I would have really, I can answer that one. It's like buying a boat. You don't buy a boat because it makes sense. You buy a boat because you want a boat. Same thing with the Freefall Convention. Did I really sit down and analyze? Bringing in this C-130, I knew how much it was going to cost me. I knew how much the fuel was going to be. I knew how much the ferry costs were going to be. I knew how much it was going to cost. Did I really ever look at it and say it takes this number of skydivers to break even? No, I didn't. And no, would I want to? I mean, if 50 people showed up, it wasn't going to make a bunch of money. It's going to lose a lot of money, and that's the way it is. But sometimes if you believe in something, if you really want to do something, you got to roll the dice, and you got to have confidence that if I do this, the whole thing. If you build it, they will come, and that was kind of the philosophy from the beginning, and it worked out pretty well.
I feel like there's my perception of you, Don, is that you're somewhat fearless, right? Like, you have taken big risks, particularly in the businesses that we'll talk about here in a minute, where there is so much to be scared of. There's so much risk of, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to be on the hook for a lot of money. How are you able to shoulder so much risk as a business person?
Well, prior my life prior to, after college for a very short amount of time, as soon as I got out of college, I kind of started thinking, well, what do I want to do? And my philosophy my whole life's kind of been the same. It's like, well, what can I do that A, I would enjoy doing, B, is fun, and C, makes money? So, I mean, that's kind of been my philosophy my whole life as far as business goes. So right out of college, again, this is going back to before internet days, I had actually done a study using newspapers to look up the value of automobiles up and down what I'll call the Mississippi River Valley versus Southern California, Newport Beach, Laguna Beach area. And what I found out was Porsches and Mercedes, a $20,000 Porsche or Mercedes could easily be bought for $14,000 or $15,000 back in the Midwest. So right out of college, I took actually almost 100 cars over about a year and a half period out to California, sold them, used that money to buy real estate. And within a year and a half out of college, I'd taken all those cars out to California. I owned 5 homes out in California that were rental properties. And I'm like, well, that was fun, but now it's boring. What am I going to do now? And I happened to be near El Toro Marine Base, actually, watching military Navy jets do touch and goes all day. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to join the Navy. So that was probably a year and a half, 2 years out of college. I thought, I've made the money I need to make. Now let's go have fun. And that's how I ended up joining the Navy. So I don't know if that story all falls together, but anyhow, I was financially well off to where I could afford to do the things I wanted to do.
Yeah, and you make it sound so very simple. Like, I wanted to do this, and so I went and did that. What's the big fuss? I want to go a level deeper here, and that is, I feel that similar to Cheryl Stearns, because Cheryl said this. She said, "There's no plan B. There is only plan A." And you mentioned, I didn't really have a plan B. I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I knew I wanted to be in Colorado. There were no other options. That's what I was going to do. That's what you went and did.
Both are true. There was no plan B on either.
What I'm trying to, my audience to capture that I observe about you is that you are very focused and dogged in that focus. And the story I'd like for you to share, because this highlights your level of focus and your doggedness or stubbornness, perhaps, if you mind me saying, is getting the 727 aircraft at the World Freefall Convention. No one other than D.B. Cooper is known to have ever jumped from that, and I think that was your inspiration. Would you share the story of how you were able to secure a 727 for the convention?
Well, sure. And you're right. Being a skydiver, I mean, the creme de la creme of skydiving, in my opinion, would be to jump out of a 727. So part of my motivation is I just wanted to do it. So, basically I had this concept, and I'm very familiar with the FAA. Obviously there's been a lot of things I've been involved with the FAA. I mean, I was president of Classic Jet Aircraft Association in the 90s. And basically I met in Washington, D.C. with the people that basically write the regulations. So I represented Classic Jet Aircraft Association. The head of the EAA was there. The head of what was then the Confederate Air Force was there. And the FAA was there. We sat around a round table, and we actually wrote the regulations on this is how you're going to own and operate and certify pilots and mechanics and aircraft operators for experimental jet aircraft. So I'm pretty familiar with how the FAA works. So when I was getting ready to bring in a 727, first thing I did was research all the FARs. In other words, I was going to operate under Part 91, which is general aviation. Then there's Part 105, which pertains to skydiving. I'd reviewed all the regulations. So I basically went to my local FSDO and said, I'm going to use a 727 for skydiving, and I don't see anything that says I can't do it. And they said, we'd love to help you, but it's way beyond our scope, so I think you need to go talk to Region. I said, great. So I went and talked to Region, told them what I wanted to do. And they said, not only no, but hell no, and you'll never do that, and it'll never be accomplished. And I went, okay, fair enough. So now I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. So I ended up finally getting an appointment with a gentleman. His name was Tony Broderick at the time, and his title was he's the Deputy Administrator for Aircraft Certification and Regulation. In other words, he's the number one guy. He's the guy that signs a document that makes a Boeing 777 a Boeing 777. Okay. So now I'm talking to the number one guy. Told him what I wanted to do and told him I don't see any reason why I can't do it. He said, well, okay. He said, we will give you a list of reasons why you can't do it. And if you can answer all those questions, come back and talk to us. And I'm fine. That's what I'm looking for. So he gave me a list of 22 reasons. Number one is you can't prove that it's safe to jump out of a Boeing 727 series aircraft. And he said, oh, by the way, don't even bring D.B. Cooper's name to the table. Fair enough. My next step was to go out to Seattle, to the Boeing plant. And unfortunately, I'd already found out that whenever Boeing quits manufacturing an aircraft, they destroy all the test data for liability reasons. But I also had heard that there was a gentleman that was involved with a test done in 1964. The test is D5960, actually. And this test was done by Boeing, flying around for 350 hours, throwing things out of the aft air stair of a Boeing 727 in an attempt to sell it to the U.S. Air Force, U.S. military, as a long-range insertion aircraft. You can fly to your destination at Mach 0.85, lower the aft air stair, and you can put your troops and or cargo out and get them there quicker and all that kind of stuff. And the Air Force looked at it and said, well, that's cool. That's a great idea. Unfortunately, we have a C-130 that does that job, so thanks, but no thanks. Now, knowing that there was a person there at Boeing, I knew his name, first name was Clyde. He was at Boeing. He was the project director in 1964, now a senior vice president for Boeing. Showed up finally after about a week of going through secretaries and going through all the people that prevent me from getting to him. I finally got into his office. And I walked in his office and literally floor to ceiling, all the way around his room with one of those rolling ladders. You could see he'd never literally thrown away a scrap of paper in the whole time he'd been at Boeing for 40 years or whatever. I walked in, introduced myself. He said, Don, I know who you are, and I know why you're here. I said, well, great. I said, Clyde, rumor has it that you have this test that was done in 1964. He said, well, that rumor's correct. And he said, it's been sitting up there on my wall since 1964. Nobody's ever asked for it. I'm getting ready to retire in about 6 months. So he climbed up his ladder. He got a box out with 6,400 pages on Boeing letterhead of how to use a Boeing 727 series aircraft, 100 or 200, for personnel and or air cargo drop. He gave it to me, and I was able to answer the other 21 questions. Showed up on Tony Broderick's office about a year later, walked in, and it makes a really loud sound when you more or less slam 6,400 pages down on a desk and say, item 1. Then I went and said, item 2. And I went through all items, and he kind of smiled. He kind of shook his head, and he said, well, that's impressive. And I said, thank you, sir. I said, can I ask when I might get a response? And he had a little guy standing next to him that was his assistant that I didn't care too much for. He said, Mr. Kirlin, he said, we'll get back to you in a timely manner after we have time to examine all this and review the test data. And I looked away from him and I looked at Tony. I said, Tony, when can I expect a response? He said, you'll have one in 7 days. And indeed I did. So that's how we brought in the first Boeing 727 to Quincy for the Freefall Convention. I got to be the first one out of the 727. So everybody that jumped out of it got a D.B. Cooper number. So my official D.B. Cooper number is 2 because I felt D.B. definitely deserved number 1.
Oh, what a great story!
It was fun. It was fun. Then I showed up in his office the next year and said, Tony, Super Constellation? He said, yeah, I heard you were coming. He said, don't even bring in C-121, which is the same airplane, but it's military variant, but you can't use that. That doesn't work. What they allowed me to do is do a, quote, field demonstration to prove it was safe. So I actually got to go fly around in a Super Constellation. I got to jump out of the main door on the left. I got to jump out of the auxiliary door on the right. I did that twice on the left, twice on the right. And that was a field demonstration of compatibility and safety, and they approved me to use the Constellation. Then, of course, Ford Tri-Motor, Stagger Wing Beach, on and on and on. It keeps going, B-17, B-24, and whatnot.
You know what I love about this is the effort that you made for skydivers.
Well, I mean, I'm a skydiver, and like my dad always said, if you love what you're doing, you're never working. And for me, that was fun. It was fun. It was fun putting it together for the skydivers, and it was fun just me personally accomplishing. I get a lot of satisfaction out of accomplishing things that have literally never been done before, and that's satisfying all by itself.
I have to know, one of the jump aircraft was the blimp from, and I remember this, I remember seeing it on TV, the Family Channel blimp. How does one even get permissions to get a TV network's blimp to jump?
That was a challenge. Because Family Channel, the people, the blimp people, the drivers, they wanted to do it. And even Family Channel, the marketing people wanted to do it. Their lawyers absolutely said, no way are we, we've got enough exposure with you flying around in a blimp anyhow. We're not going to have people jumping out of it. And I said, well, that's very understandable. There's only one thing that kind of trumps lawyers, and that's the marketing people. So, we've had the Today Show at the Freefall Convention. They did a live remote from there. We had Good Morning America at the Freefall Convention. We've had CNN at the Freefall Convention. So once I started showing them the level of marketing and coverage, and not only locally, but not only domestically, U.S., but internationally, the marketing people were able to push the lawyers out of the way, and we were able to accomplish getting them the permission to bring in the Family Channel blimp.
How many people can jump from the blimp on one load?
You can only have two people at a time. So you have a person and a video person. Reluctantly, I had to be the first one to go out. And of course, I had a video person. So I've got a phenomenal jump with me coming right out of the blimp, which is one of my favorite pictures ever. Anyhow, so I did one jump, and my partner, Rob Ebbing, did another jump. And they authorized us to do 8 jumps total. So eight, meaning mine counted as one, even though it's 2 people. So we had 8 total jump opportunities, each one with a jumper and a photographer. So I made one jump, my partner made one jump, and then we actually decided we could have sold them for a whole bunch of money, but that's not the goal of the Freefall Convention. So we actually raffled off the next 6 slots. So basically, everybody that came to the Freefall Convention had a wristband number. So we basically just put we made up all the wristband numbers, put it in a big drawing, and then one night on stage we had a drawing, and the 6 lucky jumpers found out who they were. They're going to get to jump out of the blimp with a photographer.
That's awesome. I was wondering if you could only have such small capacity, what was the lift ticket rate to jump from a blimp? But you solved that.
Hell, it would have been thousands of dollars. Definitely would have been thousands of dollars. But yeah, no, because, a lot of the skydivers that were at the Freefall Convention were very well-to-do. That's just, you get your whole cross-section, but a lot of them were very well-to-do that came to the Freefall Convention, obviously, because some of the things we did is we auctioned off rides in L-39s, which I always flew those, and we also had rides in the MiG-21, and we'd auction those off. And basically, I'd provide the fuel for the L-39 and the MiG-21, and all the money that we raised went to local charities. And we raised well over, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for local charities with those auctioned off rides at the convention.
Extraordinary. On the busiest days in the height of the World Freefall Convention, how many aircraft might be flying simultaneously?
Well, at any one time, basically, there's always we ran parallel jump runs. Each jump run was about a little more than a quarter mile offset of the center line of the jump run. So at any point in time, I'll just tell you right now, we'd have, six Super Otters. We'd have 6 Sky Vans. We had 3 King Airs, and basically all those aircraft, there's never more than usually one of them on the ground at a time. In other words, 1 Sky Van, one Otter, Super Otter, or 1 King Air. The other ones are all up in the rotation airborne. Separate from that, in a different location, but not far away, the Pit Special is going up and doing the inverted jumps. Separate from that, we had the Bell 412 helicopter, which is also flying continuously at the same time, but dropping in a different location. We also had 4 hot air balloons that would launch anytime during the day. So they're going up. And by the way, the hot air balloons, the ones I brought in were unique in that most hot air balloons are 90,000 cubic feet and take 4 jumpers. These were all 216,000 cubic feet and took 10 jumpers. So they would be launching at the same time while all this, and they launched out of the main landing zone. So while the balloons are filling up and launching, skydivers are landing all around them. And oh, by the way, the city asked, is there any chance that you can also have commercial air service going on at the same time? And I said, oh, absolutely, no problem. And they said, well, you need to stop jumping during that time? I said, no, we don't stop jumping ever. We're jumping all day long. However, we will bring in commercial service during the event, which we did do, which that's remarkable all by itself, that the commercial airline is saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and land an airplane, and there's going to be canopies coming down on both sides of the runway while you're landing. That was a very unique situation to arrange, too.
All right, Don. So let's talk about a further logistic here, because my brain is tracking. You've got CASAs that are getting to altitude slower than Twin Otters.
Mm-hmm.
You've got King Airs that are probably lapping everybody, certainly Mike Mullen's King Air.
Right.
You've got Pit Special that is running at a lower altitude underneath where everybody's exiting at 13,000 odd feet.
Right.
You mentioned the hot air balloons. You've got commercial aircraft. This is a little bit more than your average manifest can handle in talking to all those pilots. How were you able to have so much activity in that box, if you will, above the drop zone with so many different types of aircraft, with so many people under parachute? How is this managed?
Well, that's a great question. And there's two things to that, actually. One is after the first year, I realized that, all of this was going to get very big, very fast. So I went, in Quincy is in Illinois, and next door to Illinois is Missouri. So I went over to Missouri because I knew that they had an Air National Guard combat control unit. What this is an actual control tower that fits into a C-130. And basically in a combat zone, if they need air control, literally this tower rolls out the back of a C-130. It's lifted up with a crane. The legs come out, the antennas go up, and in a matter of probably an hour and a half, you can go from no air control to total air control. So we had the Missouri Air National Guard Combat Control Unit controlling all the aircraft. So that's how we handled that. But the other part of that you just asked for is how do you, with manifest, you talked about manifest. So we had the normal manifest that I've always been accustomed to my whole life in skydiving, where you have some people sitting there putting together a list and they're saying load number such and such, you're going to go in 15 minutes, all that kind of stuff. Well, after the first year, knowing where it was going to go the second year, I thought that manifest style is not going to work at all. So we're just going to throw that out the window. So what system will work? Well, obviously I'm going to look at something that's proven and been successful, and that's Disneyland. So to me, it was very simple. So we're no more manifest. It's gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to have loading tents. And the aircraft would land on one runway. They'd land on a runway. They would turn and go down a second runway that's 90 degrees to the landing runway. They go down. They're basically the center line now is a dividing line. The aircraft are going down one side. They turn at the end. We have two hot refueling pits at the end. If they need fuel, they get fuel. Then they turn and go up to their appropriate tent. So we have a Casa tent, a Super Otter tent, a King Air tent, all this kind of stuff. So the point being is the skydiver goes and buys tickets. So he goes and buys a roll of tickets. And your tickets can be used on any of the standard fleet aircraft. So you can go jump on a King Air, you can jump on a Casa, whatever you want. And the aircraft operators love this because literally they would start their engines at 7:30 in the morning and literally shut down at sunset after the last load. So it was an extremely efficient way to just get the maximum number of people on the aircraft the quickest way possible. And there was no manifest required. So that really expedited the loading process.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. Don, I remember I went to a World Freefall Convention in Rantoul in the early 2000s, and I remember I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, I just walked to the tent. Like, there's no 20-minute call.
No. Yeah.
obviously. I mean, you just go and get in line, and within, usually within 20 minutes, you probably less than that,
Oh
you've got an
yeah.
airplane to board. It was wild. I heard a stat that stated that at the height of the convention, and for those we haven't even talked about, I think it was almost around close to 6,000 jumpers at the height of this thing at one event. I mean, a big boogie today is 500 jumpers.
Right.
So, I mean, just incredible scale. How much fuel does one buy to have on hand? I mean, how many gallons of fuel would be pumped during the course of this? And how do you hot fuel so many aircraft moving at such a fast pace?
Well, and see, that's a funny thing. You talk about that, but it's kind of like watching an Indy 500 race. Okay, they're all going 220 miles an hour, but it's all fluid. It's all very smooth. And same thing here. So basically, as an airplane comes taxi, so they land on one runway, they turn off on the perpendicular runway, they go down one side of it. At the very end, they turn around. If they need fuel, there's two pits. They can get fuel. If they don't need fuel, they continue on around, pull up to their tent. I mean, they pull up to their tent, and literally, they're there. The engines are running. They don't power down an engine or anything. I mean, skydivers pile in. When the last person's in, they taxi out. And oh, by the way, they taxi out, and they taxi just past where that other runway is, and they take off on that runway. So they don't. So we have one dedicated landing runway. We have one dedicated takeoff runway. The dedicated takeoff runway also serves as a taxi back, staging, and hot fueling runway as well. So it looks like if you watch the whole thing, you'd go, it's just fluid. It's kind of like a bicycle. I mean, the chain's moving, the spokes are moving, the wheels are turning, but it's all turning very fluidly all together. So, and that was my job, is to kind of keep an eye out and see if anything's not running smoothly. That's when I would, try and intercept it and try and correct the problem.
Okay, so we've got this incredible air operation, which, by the way, there's a whole nother story of how you did get that air control in, because Missouri didn't want to come over to Illinois, at least with the National Guard resources. I won't say any more. Tell that story if you would.
Well, just briefly, yeah. So the Air Guard came over. I asked them to come over and participate, and they did. And they did a great job. That was the second year of the Freefall Convention. But then by the third year, maybe the fourth year, the governor of Missouri said, wait a second. Why is the Missouri Air National Guard going to Illinois? They should use their own combat control unit. Well, there's only about 3 of them in the entire country, and one of them happened to be in Missouri. So I went over and talked to the governor and told him how important this was. It's an international event, on and on and on. And he said, well, Don, I appreciate you coming over, and I'd like to be able to help you out, but our people need to get training in Missouri with the Missouri Air National Guard. And I went, okay, fair enough. So then I went back to the Air National Guard and I said, okay, here's what the governor said, that you need to get your training here because it'll be every bit as good as what you could get at the Freefall Convention. They said, we know what we need to do. So they literally went and showed the number of controls they get, controls at the Freefall Convention. I mean, if you can imagine the number of takeoff and, well, I can just tell you. So basically, during the peak of the Freefall Convention, every 1 minute, 3 seconds, we had a control, either a takeoff or a landing. During the Freefall Convention, we were busier than O'Hare Airport. So anyhow, but they had all the very, very detailed statistics of the number of controls that they did during the Freefall Convention. They went back and talked to the governor and said, sir, the only place, if we do it in Missouri, that'll be great. And we'll do, maybe, 10, 15, maybe 20 controls a day. At the Freefall convention, we'll do thousands. And they said the only place that we can get that level of training is an active combat zone. That's exactly the words they used. So the governor agreed.
It's just the scale of it is extraordinary. Don, there's one thing to be managing all this air traffic, but then there's this basic little city of 5,000 people that are there for, I don't even know how long each event was, at least a week, 10 days?
10 days.
10 days. Yeah. Skydivers are notorious for partying. I mean,
oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother set of logistics, from toilets to tents.
Sure.
I remember being there during, vicious storms that were ripping tents down, and quickly the whole sort of tent city is getting put back together. What were some of the headaches that you had to solve for the logistics for that many people at essentially the Woodstock of skydiving?
Well, I remember the number that we had. We had 62 porta potties get delivered every year. We had 16 food vendors. Our actual food tent was 80 feet wide and 160 feet long. And basically one portion of it, the 160 foot long, is basically a 160 foot long table. And behind that table was all the different food vendors. So, you could get everything from Indian food to steaks cooked for you there. So that was the food tent. And then the entertainment tent was another tent right next to it. By the way, both these tents are located on a taxiway because we closed down a portion of the airport just for the event. So the entertainment tent, we had live entertainment every night. And we had, some national bands. We had, Steppenwolf there. We had Head East there. We, on and on and on. So we had a lot of pretty good bands there. And we also gave away 400 kegs of beer every year. That was part of the registration fee. Skydivers like to party for sure. And we also had 5 different bars located around the airport that all opened at sunset after the last load, because a lot of the Europeans had no interest in drinking that lousy American beer. So they wanted to have some better quality stuff. So anyhow, that was all part of the logistics, was lining up the food vendors, lining up the entertainment. Like I said, the porta potties, and on and on and on. And the other thing we did that was kind of unique is after each World Freefall Convention, we sent out questionnaires, not to a few skydivers, but to every skydiver. And we said, what can we do to make this event better for you? Well, that's never been done before in skydiving, I'm quite sure. And it was interesting. There was so many simple things that made such a difference. Like one guy said, hey, I don't mind buying bottled water. He said, but boy, wouldn't it be cool if you put a water fountain up by Manifest? And I thought, yeah, wouldn't it be cool? So let's go ahead and do that. Just little stuff like that. But I think just the fact that you're asking skydivers, what can we do to make this better for you, as opposed to, and I don't want to say anything negative, but I've been to a lot of boogies, and a lot of times the boogie organizer kind of sees himself more as a godlike position. Like you're just lucky to be here at my boogie. And I looked at myself more as a facilitator, as hey, I'm a skydiver, you're a skydiver, how can I make it better for you?
The convention went from 1990 to 2003 or 2006. Six. So that's a long run. What was the hardest day of all the festivals that you ran, or conventions, excuse me?
Oh, there was, like you said, there was a big storm that came through one time, and it took down both the big tops, both the 160-foot big tops. So it's like, well, what do? You don't just find another 160-foot tent laying around. So the guy that owned the tent facility basically packed up all his sewing machines, and he showed up there with everything from his shop, and we're talking like eight or nine sewing machines and his whole crew, and they worked through the night, and by the next morning the tents were back up. So yeah, it's pretty remarkable what the people took a very vested interest in this event and seeing it be successful, and they were willing to do everybody, my staff, volunteers, the employees, I think we had about 125 employees, but we had 200 volunteers, and everybody took it personally that it was their job to make it successful.
Boy, was it. I feel like there's an entire generation of skydivers today that missed out on the greatest skydiving event there ever was.
It was great. It was a remarkable event every year for me to watch it unfold. It was just, I just look at it and just take tremendous pride in the fact that, what I've done is I've assembled a team of people. And when I say a team, we're talking the Mike Mullins, the Larry Hills, Paul and his Casas. It was just everybody. And, all the load organizers, the best of the load organizers. First year was Roger Ponce and Jerry Bird, and the best of the best. And that's kind of what I did. Everybody everybody in every aircraft wanted to be at the convention because it's, first of all, it's a convention, but for the aircraft operators, very profitable. So I could go through and say, all right, I don't want just otters, who's got the super otters? And there was like I said, 5 or 6 of them. So I said, all right, I want all of those. Who's got the Sky Vans? Well, I think there's 4 or 5 of those. Okay, I want all of those. Who's got the best performing King Air? Well, we know who that is. Mike, bring your King Air. So, yeah, it was just able to go through and pick out the best of the best. And the same thing with the airplanes, with the load organizers, with the coaches. You could come to the Freefall Convention if you had 50 jumps. My whole deal was I wanted to provide stuff to skydivers that was free. So, we had a big free coaching staff there. And the way that worked out, Gary Peak actually ran that for me. And the way it worked out was Gary would bring in even more coaches. And these coaches, and I'd say there was probably maybe 30 or 40 of them, they got to jump for free. And I worked it out with the aircraft operators that anybody that had a coach hat on got to bring those people on for free. Well, if a skydiver showed up and he's only got 50 jumps, a coach may grab him and say, all right, we're going to go up and do a 3-way, right? This coach may put together a group. Steve Woodford would put together a 10-way Speedstar competition, that kind of thing. So I kind of just more or less brought in really good people and gave them free rein to do whatever they want to do. Just make it fun and bring the skydivers in, make sure they're having a good time.
Don, the year that I was there, I was the guy with 50 jumps.
All right.
And I was so intimidated because of the sheer massive size of this operation. And then once I got settled in and found groups and, I did the pit biplane jump. And I mean, by the end of it, it was the time of my life. I recall all of us leaving feeling so exhausted.
Yeah.
Partied hard. Everyone jumped hard. How exhausted were you at the end of each of these events?
It's funny. I couldn't do it these days for sure, but I know somehow I managed, because I never wanted to miss the evening activities. There's too much fun going on. Traditionally, I was usually in bed around 3 or 3:30 every night, and I was back up every morning by 7:30 down there at the food tent having breakfast with the skydivers. I mean, I didn't want to miss anything, and I didn't miss anything. So it'd take me about a week and a half afterwards to recover from it. But I just had too much fun to hell. I averaged 42 jumps every Freefall Convention. So I was still having, and I did make every single 727 jump ever made at the Freefall Convention. I was on it.
What a party.
What a party, man. That's exactly what it was. It was a great time. So, I know a lot of people have talked about wanting to have, and boy, did I get hit up a lot at the Hall of Fame about bringing it back and doing it again. And, the thoughts crossed my mind. I have talked to some people. I mean, Rob Collins and I still stay in touch. I just talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he's got the B-17, the B-24, and so forth. And, he even asked, he said, Don, do you think you'll ever do it again? I said, man, I don't know. The thoughts crossed my mind. And, right now, I'm retired from being an airline pilot. I sold Air USA. I have started up a new company, so it's actually taken a lot of my time. But the thought has crossed my mind. That's all I can say. It'd be fun.
Amazing. On behalf of all the skydivers that were privileged enough to go to that event, thank you.
Thank you.
Time of our lives.
Thank you. And I thank all the skydivers for coming to the event. I mean, it was an honor and a privilege to be able to put it on for the 17 years. Glad I did it, and it was just, for me, it was just one hell of a lot of fun. That's what I could say.
For a skydiving focused podcast, this would be the perfect spot to end. But there is now another significant chapter that I know had to have been going on during the Freefall Convention because you had a MiG there, and that's Air USA. Can you tell us what that was and how that got going for you?
When I was in the military, better yet, after I got out of the military, I saw the military continuously downsizing. And okay, whatever, that's fine. But then they had, at the time when I was in, they had what they call utility squadrons. And a utility squadron in the tactical world would be like in the movie Top Gun. Jester and Viper were operating aircraft that were out of a utility squadron. Well, the Navy had 12 utility squadrons. The Air Force had 12 utility squadrons. They did use them for a lot of things like air-to-air combat. They used them for air-to-ground training of forward air controllers, dropping live ordnance, all this kind of stuff. That's what the utility squadrons did. Well, somebody, rumor has it, some bean counter, so to speak, at the Pentagon figured out hey, you know what? All these utility squadrons can never actually go to combat. So we can save a lot of money. Let's just disband them all and park them all. And guess what? They did. So all of a sudden, now my son, who's an F-15 pilot flying against F-15 pilot. Well, first of all, you're up there running around. Red air is bad guy, blue air is good guy. So the blue air guy is doing the training. The red air guy is just being a target. So you got an aircraft that costs $50,000 an hour to be up there flying around as just a target, which is crazy. Not to mention the fact that when they actually do engage in combat, it's two pilots with identical training in identical aircraft with identical backgrounds. You're not going to really learn much. So I saw an opportunity after the wall came down to go over to former Soviet republics. So rather than mess around with Poland or Slovakia or Czechoslovakia at that time, I decided to go real deep. So I went all the way to Kyrgyzstan, which is 4,800 kilometers east of where the wall was. And there was no Americans there for sure. But I knew it was a big training base. And they had 200 basically pristine L-39 aircraft sitting on a ramp. After the wall came down, Mother Russia said, give us all the airplanes back. There are airplanes. And each country said, no, whatever's sitting here stays here. Okay, fine. So then Kyrgyzstan had all these aircraft, but they were very poor. In fact, people living in yurts over there. So when the wall came down, they had no aviation fuel, they had no aircraft mechanics, and they had no pilots. They just had a whole bunch of beautiful aircraft sitting there. So I went there, negotiated with their Congress, actually got Air USA recognized as an authority authorized to buy from them since they've never sold anything ever, much less military stuff. So I ended up buying the first 7 L-39s in 94. Later that year, I went back and bought another 14 L-39s, approached the military and said, hey, I'd like to provide adversary aircraft training for you. And they basically said, well, that's the dumbest idea we've ever heard because your pilots aren't worth a shit compared to our wonderful, awesome, well-trained military pilots. And they said, what pilots would you use? And I said, well, it's funny you mention that because the pilot that flew for you for 20 years, the day he retired, he comes to work for me. So it's going to be a very highly qualified pilot. And they went, okay, all right, well, that's not bad. And they said, can your airplanes carry electronic warfare equipment, jamming equipment, and so forth? And I said, well, I'm sure they can. We'll modify them as necessary. So we did. So finally, it took until 1999. They gave us a chance. But I was one of the pilots. We ferried a flight of 4 aircraft out to Miramar, and we got to do our first mission. And it turned out to be successful. And the military actually liked it. They realized that basically it cut down 50% of their training for adversary air training whenever we're flying, because basically now there's only 1 airplane in the air that belongs to the military rather than 2. So they actually liked the idea. So they said, that's great. They said, but your L-39 is a good airplane, but you give us something faster? I said, sure. So I went over and I bought L-59s that had just gotten released from the Czech Air Force. So I brought those over and we flew L-59s for a while and did a lot of work with those, carried all sorts of stuff, including a tow reel that we towed out a target 22,000 feet behind it, and the ship would fly down close to the water and the ships would shoot the target and all that kind of stuff. So we did a lot of stuff with the L-59. They said, that's great, but can you give us something faster? I said, sure. So then I went and bought from the German military the German Alpha Jet. Real good airplane. Mach 0.94 speed and all that kind of stuff. A lot of time on station. Very capable, very good threat presentation aircraft to do air combat with. Very small, very hard to see. So they liked that a lot. So then they said, that's great, but can you give us something faster? And I said, well, yeah. So then I went to South Korea and I bought BA Hawks. And these particular Hawks are supersonic. They're Mach 1.2. So I bought 12 of those about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were very happy with that. They said, can you give us some unique aircraft for research and development? I said, sure. So that's when I went over and I bought 2 from Kyrgyzstan and 2 from Ukraine, and these are MiG-29s. And, of course, the MiG-29 is a viable threat currently. A lot of bad guys still fly the MiG-29. I mean, Russia flies them, North Korea flies them, other countries fly them that are not U.S. friendly. So anyhow, it's a great airplane to do research and development with. And also, it served as a red air aircraft as well. So that was Air USA. and I ran Air
Oh,
US.
sorry. I got questions before.
Sure.
Were you ever concerned about your safety or security? Because if you're going to buy, say, a MiG-29, I imagine Russia doesn't want you to buy that. I mean, was there any concern about security or fear of that?
Well, I had some sketchy moments for sure, because I went to all these countries by myself, and I just that's where I like to travel. So I was in Kyrgyzstan, and after I'd bought the first 1421 aircraft, actually, I was over there, and the deal makers in those countries are former KGB guys. They're the ones that everybody they know how to make deals. So anyhow, I was working with these two gentlemen. Colonel Romyantsev and Mr. Ziaika. And these two gentlemen had been the people that had been my facilitators to make this whole thing work out. So one day after I'd been there 6 months, they came to me and they said, Don, we're leaving today, and it would behoove you to probably leave today as quickly as possible. I said, okay. So that translates into they probably weren't giving the people the right amount of money to they just weren't fulfilling their end of the deal. They were leaving and they thought I should leave. So I went and actually talked to my translator at the time and asked her if she could find me a way out of the country, and I needed to leave as soon as possible. And she got a hold of a friend of hers that was an air traffic controller, and he had just gotten off of a 12-hour shift. And he is now going to drive me from Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan to Almaty, Kazakhstan, which is about a 5.5-hour drive at night after he had finished a 12-hour shift. And by the way, he didn't speak any English. So I'm sitting in the car with him. We're driving down this black road, no lights, of course, anywhere, middle of nowhere. And he started to fall asleep. And I kind of tapped him and I said, you want me to drive? And I'll drive. And he's like, no. Shakes his head no. And so he starts doze off again. So I grabbed the wheel. I said, you want me to drive? He said, no. It's fine. So we're driving down, and finally the third time he falls asleep. I just let the car just start to go off the road, grabbed the wheel, got it back on the road. It's like, can I drive now? He says, okay. So I drive now. So now I drive and he's sound asleep. So I see we're coming up to this big dome of lights, and obviously it's a border crossing. So I stop the car, wake him up, point to it. He's like, okay. He says, come with me. So he's going to, I don't have any, I've got no visa. I got no way to legally go in the country. So he puts me in the trunk of the car, covers me up with a blanket, tightens his tie up because he's still in uniform, goes up to the border guard and hands him whatever paperwork he needed, got me through the border, took me to the Almaty airport in Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan. Yeah, Kazakhstan, and dropped me off at the airport. And it's like, good luck. Okay. So I walked in and just asked for the captain in charge of security at the airport, and went in his office. Commandant he was actually. And the commandant said, well, how'd you get here? And I said, well, they brought me across the border. And he said, well, who brought you? And I said, well, I don't know, but they're gone. He's like, okay. He said, you don't have a visa? I said, no. He said, well, you shouldn't be here. I said, I know that. I said, that's why I'm talking to you. What do I need to do? And he just shakes his head. He said, this is bad. This is bad. This is very, very bad. And I'm like, okay. I know this. Very, very bad. I got you. Very, very bad. So anyhow, I said, how bad is this? How bad is this? How much is this going to cost? Anyhow, it's $100. So for $100, I got my visa. And actually, yeah, for $100, I got my visa, got on an airplane, and I flew from Bishkek to Istanbul, to London, to New York, to Denver. It was a 52-hour flight. The day I got home, that day, we had already pre-planned our Freefall Convention annual staff meeting going to Aspen, and we had 24 people show up at my house that day, and we got in a car and drove to Aspen. We spent next 3 days partying like crazy. And anyhow, so that was our annual Freefall Convention. And my wife even said, you're going to be exhausted. And I said, man, I'm not going to be exhausted. This is my second biggest party of the year, and I'm not about to miss it. So it was great.
Gosh, Don, when you write your book, I will be the first to buy it.
You know what? It's funny. Somebody just mentioned that yesterday. I said, nobody's going to think that nobody could possibly believe everything really did happen to one person, but it really actually did.
this may seem like a stupid question, especially in light of so many questions I could ask, but I mean, it seems audacious. You're traveling solo, you're buying all these aircraft, you see this opportunity in the marketplace, I suppose. I mean, how does one ferry out? Okay, you just bought 6, 7, 8 jets in Slovakia. How do you get them out? How do you ferry them?
Well, you don't ferry them.
How does
You
that
don't
work?
ferry them. Wherever I'm buying aircraft, it's for so many reasons. It's cheaper to pack them up and put them in 40-foot containers. So, you bring in people, like I said, in Kyrgyzstan, they'd lost all their mechanics. So I bring in mechanics from whatever country, maybe these are in Kyrgyzstan. So I'd bring in L-39 mechanics from Kazakhstan. And same thing, like when I brought the MiG-29s, I brought the MiG-29s, 2 from Kyrgyzstan, 2 from Ukraine. I brought those to U.S. Well, I've got very talented mechanics, and I did have all the manuals for the MiG-29 in English. That's another thing. Is whenever you buy weird airplanes, you have to find some country that operates that particular aircraft that happens to speak English, like, for instance, Pakistan or something like that, or India, whatever. So you go to these countries and you have to go buy the manuals. That's a whole different part of the equation because you buy the airplanes from Kyrgyzstan, all the manuals are in Russian. So, anyhow, that's part of the equation. So, like when I brought the MiG-29s over, I needed mechanics, so I brought those guys from Hungary. So, because Hungary was currently operating the MiG-29. What I asked for, I said, can you tell me the senior mechanic in the Hungarian military that just retired? And they said, yes, that would be Zoltan. Great. So I got a hold of Zoltan and said, Zoltan, here, I need you to come over and put together or work with my guys to assemble this MiG-29. I said, pick your best 6 guys. Pick your number 1 guy for engine, ejection seat, hydraulics, airframe, avionics, and weapons. And then he is the overseer of the team. So that whole team came over and worked with my team for the next 6 months to put the first MiG-29 in the air. And now my guys are all trained up and qualified on the MiG-29. That's what we did with all the aircraft. We'd bring a team over from whatever country we needed to train my guys to then support the aircraft.
Gosh, it's audacious, Don. I mean, it's
been a wild ride.
I mean, it's like, where do you get the confidence to pull some of that, stuff off? Once again, it's like this theme with you. It's nothing is impossible.
I kind of think that's true. I mean, it's yeah. If you have enough people and enough desire, and if you have enough drive, nothing's impossible. Absolutely. Many years ago, I was able to qualify to go do the Ironman triathlon. Well, when I found out that I'd been accepted, I was in no shape whatsoever to do it. So basically, I dedicated a year of training and started out at 210 pounds. And the day I actually started the Ironman, I was 176. And when I finished it, it was 167. And it wasn't that I was ever trying to lose weight. In fact, just the opposite. I was eating 5 meals a day and consuming an insane amount of calories, but still losing a lot of weight because you're training all the time. So again, it's like when I got accepted, I think I was going to be able to do it. It's like, I don't know how, but I got a year to figure it out. So, kind of the same thing. If you jump into something with both feet and you're committed and you're saying, I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it. And whatever it takes, and whoever can jump on board with me and help me out, come along. Let's make this thing happen. And if you have that attitude, it's funny because all the people that you surround yourself with, that attitude is very infectious, and it becomes everybody's attitude. They all believe that anything's possible, and then they believe that they can do it too. And, they can, like the Freefall Convention. I mean, there's so many people that worked for me and with me that did not have that level of confidence. And I would work with them and teach them what I want them to be able to do. But then when the convention started, I told them up front, I said, don't come to me and ask me what you think you should do. You know it. You have the tools. Just do it. And sure enough, they'd come to me and they'd say, well, Don, what should I do about this? And my answer was always the same. Well, what do you think you should do? And they'd say, well, I guess I should do this. And I'd say, that's what I think it is. Now, even though sometimes I'd think that probably wasn't the best thing, I'd still, to support their confidence, I would always go with what they recommended. And then maybe they'd come back to me and say, well, that maybe wasn't the best idea, but next time I do it this way, and I go, yeah, that's even better. So yeah, a lot of it's just building everybody's confidence that what we're about to do, we can do, and we will all be successful together.
Great leadership skill lessons there. This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. Don, how do you explain being able to look at opportunities in a marketplace differently than everybody? Hey, if I buy cars over here in the Midwest and I move them over to the West Coast, I can make a healthy profit. And that would be a great business for anyone. But I get bored with that, even though it was very successful. Here's an opportunity in the market. I can buy all these foreign military aircraft and allow I see a business opportunity there. And then with your current venture, which we're about to talk about quickly, is this like a sixth sense where you can look at something and see opportunities that no one else is seeing?
Well, I don't think it's a sixth sense at all. Just the opposite. I think everything I do, I see the obvious. It's obvious. So, and like you said, the new company, Falcon Air, the Falcon Air. I ran Air USA from 1994 to 2004, sold the company, acted as president for the next 2 years, and that term just ended recently. Okay, so before I'd even sold Air USA, I'd already started this new company, Falcon Air. So just like I saw the opportunity with the need for civilian contracting for adversary air and air-to-ground training with privately owned tactical jet aircraft, I kind of saw that as an opportunity. It's like, wow, that's obvious. If I can get my foot in the door, it'll be a winner. Same thing here. Falcon Air is the same thing as Air USA, only instead of tactical jets, it's all helicopters. And it's going to be a variety of helicopters for a variety of things, but probably the main thing will be the Black Hawk helicopter. So I was just over there inspecting those about a week and a half ago. My intention is to bring in Black Hawk helicopters, and there's a conversion called a Firehawk. Well, the Firehawk it's amazing firefighting equipment. And just like there was a demand for air-to-air combat, there's a tremendous demand for wildfire fighting right now. California and Colorado being at the top of the list. This Black Hawk helicopter is one of the ideal machines for firefighting. However, the people that are doing the conversion to the Firehawk, it's insanely expensive. And this is something I've always been able to do, is look at something, see the end product. How do I get to the end product, but do it at a fraction of the cost of how the competitor's doing it? And I've already got that's all dialed in and ready to go. And part of it is hiring people that had worked on the original Firehawk, actually the design engineers and so forth, that have since retired, and they will now come work for me with all the knowledge, but without the constraints of big business, so to speak. So it's like, all right, guys, if you were doing this, which you are, with no limitations, to do this most cost effectively and without any guidance, no micromanaging, no oversight whatsoever, just do the best product the most cost effectively. And we've already had this conversation, and it's like, hell yeah, I can do that. And they said, well, I could have done it before, but there was too much input, too much big business and so forth. And that's the beauty of what I've done always, be it the Freefall Convention, Air USA, or Falcon. I've been the sole, I'm it. So I'm the board of the directors. I'm the decision maker. There's no BS. Oh, well, I have to check with so-and-so, and I have to run it by the lawyer staff, and I have to do. No, if I think it's a good idea, and I've done this before where people will contact me and say, can you do this? It's like, yeah. Do you have to talk to anybody about it? It's like, nah, just had that conversation. We're good. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, when do you want it there? And that's worked out very well. And it's been very good. And even when I was competing with other entities in the adversary air world, because most of them had investors, they had boards, they had this and that and the other thing. that just it just slows everything down. You just can't move. You can't be agile. You can't move fast enough. And if you can move fast enough, you can beat out the competition every time, especially if you can be more cost effective.
So the idea with Falcon is, with more and more fires becoming a real regular thing, you provide basically a fleet of helicopters that can help take these fires out. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. And the other thing, there's other things that I bring to the table too. So one of the things, there's a company called AirScan. AirScan did a lot of great work in Afghanistan. They took Cessna 337s, push-pull Cessna, and they put an MX-15 sensor on it. The MX-15 sensor is basically what it is. It's a ball. It's about 15 inches in diameter, and it's got 5 different cameras in it. It's got infrared. It's got EO, electro-optical. It's got LLTV, low-light TV. It's got all these different cameras for different scenarios. Well, so I bought AirScan and all of their aircraft when they came back from Afghanistan, 18 aircraft and 22 sensors. So we've done some work down in Africa with those. We've done some really good work actually catching poachers and so forth in South Africa because we've got infrared, right? So one of the things I would intend to use, which is not being used very much at all, is these type aircraft for infrared capabilities of spotting fires. So if you think about this, if you got an aircraft that's an airborne platform, a little fire pops up somewhere, you spot it immediately with infrared. You've got video downlink, which is what we already have. We've been using for a long time, video downlink. So you can downlink all this information to headquarters immediately and say, hey, here's a fire. Here's the lat long of it. And you can send out a firehawk and immediately put the fire out before it turns into a big fire. I mean, that's kind of the big picture concept.
And so will you contract everything, or are you sort of going to be the provider?
No, I always like having control of everything. So, in other words, I'll provide my helicopter, my pilots, my mechanics. I'll have the same thing with my aircraft, airborne, looking for fires, all that kind of stuff. It's just so much easier if you have control of the whole big picture as opposed to try and have parts of it not attached to the controlling entity.
Don, who are you?
Man, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy that likes skydiving and flying airplanes. That's just that simple. Nothing more. I mean, this is, keep in mind, everything we're talking about, this is all fun for me. It's all fun. I mean, all the stuff I do, be it the Freefall Convention, flying fighter jets, whatever, man, I do it for free. It's just fun. It's just the way and I like building things. I like seeing things grow and opportunities presented to people. And, it's just plain fun. And out here, later today, I will be going out flying a Bell 206 Jet Ranger. And tomorrow, I'm meeting up with a friend, and we're going to go fly an L-39 and a PC-9, a Pilatus PC-9, which is an Australian military trainer. So, to me, a perfect day is to go out and fly a fighter jet and fly a helicopter and maybe go fly a seaplane and then end up with a skydive on a sunset load. That's a perfect day.
Do you not feel stress?
No.
You could be retired right now.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah. Many, many times over. And in fact, somebody just asked me that. They said, when are you going to retire and take up golf? And I said, traveling around, buying, selling military aircraft internationally, that's golf to me. That's my golf. That's relaxing. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's just, that's my retirement. That's my fun. Yep.
I feel like you are the equivalent of the Red Bull athlete in the aviation business world.
I don't know about that, but and again, to me, it really, seriously, it is all fun. It's just everything we're talking about is just what I enjoy doing. Like I said, if I weren't making a dime doing it, I'd still love to do it. I'd love to travel. I love to just buy and sell and make deals internationally with aircraft. It's just plain fun. And the same thing when hosting the Freefall Convention. To me, looking around, seeing all these people just hooping and hollering and having a great time, that just warms my heart.
I want to end on this little note that I want to share with my audience of my observation of you. Is you remind me, you have similar qualities of from Paul Fayard, who also is just sort of dogged and just wants, does big things. But you and Paul get emotional when you start talking about people who've been part of your journey, who have sacrificed a lot. And you got a little emotional during this interview when you started talking about the people that supported you at the World Freefall Convention, all your volunteers. You got a big heart.
Well, they're the ones who made it. I may orchestrate things. I'm the conductor and the cheerleader. But the Freefall Convention, the success of the Freefall Convention was the staff and the volunteers and the skydivers. The skydivers, they were so respectful and appreciative and contributed. And they were always there for you. If somebody parked a car mistakenly in a landing zone, and this did happen, and I'd say, hey, I need everybody's help right here. 30 skydivers would show up, and we'd lift off the car and carry it away. So, no, it was amazing. The skydivers were there to be part of the team. That's the best way I can put it. They were part of the team. They were as much of the team as the volunteers and the staff. True.
Don, and as you're saying that, you're wiping your eyes away.
I know.
So much. It's clear it means so much to you. It's not just like widgets. I'm going to put on the best thing, and it doesn't feel ego driven with you. It was just, as you said, it's just pure love of what you're doing.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, and the Paul Fayards and people like that made it so special for me. And he's just such a wonderful individual. I just can't say enough about Paul. But yeah, it was all the people working together in this massive team effort. And that's really what it was. It was a massive team effort. And very seldom did anybody ever get out of line. But if they did, I never had to say anything. Somebody else did. They'd say, "What are you doing? Come on, don't litter there. Come on, this is your home." So I saw that more than once.
Wow, Don, we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes odd, and the time has flown. And when I consider how busy your life is, you've been around the globe in the last 4 days and made time for, and that's no exaggeration, you've literally been around the globe in the last 4 days this week and still made time to talk to me today. I think it shows your love for skydiving because you're making time for skydivers to engage with me.
Sure.
Many of them. So thank you. I leave this interview with you so inspired. Man, you handle stuff with grace. You are so focused and seemingly unintimidated. And that inspires me because I want to be more like that with my own goals and ventures. So thank you for sharing your story. This has been a joy for me today. Thank you.
It's been a joy for me speaking with you as well. And I hope the skydiving community, whoever is hearing this, I hope they enjoy it as much as I did sharing with you the evolution of where the convention came from and all the people that participated in it. And I'm so thankful for all the friends that I still hear from on a very regular basis and the friendships that have been built and still stand today. It's been great.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies, Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.